DOT witness certain behavior that warrants some type of medical treatment or for mental health, then we can force them to go on a 1013 and of course voluntarily. So those are the three ways to get a person, treatment for mental health. And I mean, that's what we see a lot of times. So I mean, it's total officer discretion whether whether we actually charge them or take them to get medical treatment. As long as, like I say, there's no damage to property and there's no injury involved in whatever violation, law violation is involved. So other than that, I mean, we're still in the area. We got approval to be on nextdoor.com, so we are on nextdoor.com posting, current events, successes from the police department, different lookouts and helpful hints, that will help you not to be a victim. The city will be rolling out, it's supposed to be this month, but I think it was pushed back because they have some issues with the website, but the ATL 311. I know I go to a lot of community meetings, and a lot of people are asking about non-emergency number for the police, and just to get different issues addressed, like maybe the homeless situation. And so that's what 311 is going to be for once they go, once it's the kinks are fixed on it. It'll be www.atl.311.com for the website, and then the phone number will just be 311. We're hoping that there'll be the people managing that will be able to, put you in contact with, resources that can actually address the homeless situation. I mean, because a lot of times it's like the police, we like the catch-all, but I don't know, addressing the homeless, that's kind of it's an up and down roller coaster. And, we do the best that we can as it pertains to that. But I mean, they continue to arrest them for the same thing, and then they have nowhere to go, so they return to the place that they feel most comfortable in, the place that's home to them. And a lot of times they get arrested, and then they end up back at Virginia-Highland. Or they end up back out. And a lot of these people may have been living with a relative, and the relative passed and lost the house and whatnot, and they still, feel familiar with this community for some reason. Or, whatever ties they have to the community, it continues to bring them back. Or, because, they get a free meal on Poncemelia.
I think we know that narrative inside out. And so I appreciate it. I have one thing I want to talk to you about outside when we go on that we talked about earlier, safety issue up the street. So unless there's another question, Lieutenant Floyd will let him get back to work. And I'm going to move the meeting on to parks. And David, if you can talk about what we're at, John Howell Park and Mark's going to talk a little more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so briefly, Jack and I went out on Friday of last week and met with Peter Frawley, I was talking about the John Howell Park volleyball court revamp and modernization and repairs and improvements. So we met with them on Friday. We met with the contractors out there. We do have final permits, so now it's a matter of actually scheduling the work. It sounds like, including the wall builds and all the construction that's going to take place, probably running a full duration of about 2 months. End to end, assuming weather is fairly cooperative. So I think the goal ultimately, school's back, Inman goes back on August 4th this year, so ideally we'd like to try to back in and have the work done prior to that. I don't know if that's necessarily possible, but that's...
It's going to take 2 months?
Probably, realistically. Yeah. It could be shorter. I mean, I'm being conservative that way. We don't get shot in the foot, but 2 months is accurate, and ideally it could be a week or two shorter than that. So I think the good news is that we finally got the permit. Now it's a matter of getting getting the work started and scheduled. There's a few items that still need to occur, like meeting again with the volleyball people to see if they want to put drainage in, if we can work that out financially. But outside of that, I think we're finally almost ready to go there. So, I don't know, Jack, that was,
No, I think
Is
you're
all
right.
of the work for this project, is it all around the volleyball court?
yes.
Okay. And what is the cost of that? Is that the $50,000?
Oh, no, the whole cost is, over 100. I mean, it's
Just for the
very,
volleyball thing?
Well, it's not ju, it's the volleyball in. It's
I'll refer you to the long and extensive detailed article that's now passed from memory because I've basically forgotten it myself, it was so damn long ago.
I figured so much time had passed that the plant project had morphed since then, but it's exactly the same
It's
as it was
the
selling
same,
on
it's the
the
same project where there's a stairs being constructed, a plaza being constructed on the corner, the signs being moved, old landscaping's being pulled out, all the old crappy chain link fences leaving, a new granite
wall.
fence is being built where there's new steel fence that matches the fence across the street at the school going on top. There's new walls separating the playground from the volleyball court a little more definitively to try to reduce.
The sand coming into
Yeah.
the...
Yeah, and the sand will now stay on, will now stay substantially, there'll always be
A
some.
little bit for the kids to play on, right?
No, the kids, no, none of it belongs to the kids now. None of it will belong later, but when it's not in use, they can still go over there as they always have. And
Very well.
And they will, but there's a little fence to reduce the volleyballs flying. It's gonna look like Virginia-Highland when it's done. It's gonna match what the fence looks like, what the school looks like, what the Georgia Power Project looks like, what many places in the neighborhood, what we hope in the future the Field of Dreams will look like if we never get to that project. So it's gonna be a monster improvement, and yes, it's shockingly.
sidewalk along Arcadia or? is
No,
that-
no sidewalk along Arcadia, not at this point, that's gonna have to wait. There were too many other issues there, that one just had to go. We'd still be permitting that if we were there, yes ma'am.
What was the contribution of the volleyball and or whatever that's called?
And to this point, $2,500 of we put up 50-ish, but it's, guess what, it's crept up a little bit, what a surprise, and this Park Pride has put in 50. And so they're not paying a lot. We're paying most of it. And the city is paying, the city actually is, the city's also paying about, they're doing the fence along the volleyball. They're taking control of the volleyball courts. They're claiming the volleyball courts for the Parks Department of Atlanta.
You're
So,
kidding.
no.
On what grounds?
Well, they already.
That they own the park?
it,
They
so
own the
now
park.
they'll just be monitoring it.
Okay, I forgot. I
Managing the
forgot.
park.
Okay.
Yeah, that they're taking it back from volleyball, not from us. I mean, that's the real issue. Now, they may make a deal with the volleyball group. They have declined to do that formally so far, and the Parks Department is acting like a Parks Department these days, and we are thrilled. I mean,
But they won't pay any money.
I'm sorry?
They're not
They're
getting.
paying for the fence along the
Yeah, on the
edge of
fence,
it there,
okay.
which is money that we would have paid, we were gonna pay, along the Arcadia side.
Just briefly, for those of us who have forgotten, or never
Right.
knew, what is the volleyball?
It's a
versus the
vaguely
city?
unincorporated,
But,
not-for-profit group
no,
that ad hoc.
what is it with that volleyball court that it's like it's
There's no-
their court? Do you know, I
It's
mean,
just
I know.
historical, that's how it's been, but there's no MOU that says that's the case or anything like that, so that's what they're trying to work out with the city.
And that's up to them, we don't care.
Adverse possession.
Yeah, by now.
20 years, constant use.
They're trying to be functional, and we're trying to encourage them. And writing, there's no more function than writing a check that impresses us.
But now with the Parks Department maybe monitoring or overseeing it, you would reserve space, so anybody could go in there and reserve space, just like you can in other parks, play or whatnot. And the volleyball Atlanta people would have to do the same.
And they're not too happy about that, so that's up to them.
Well, that's,
Okay.
It's not our issue, we didn't cause that.
We got that out. We know the notion. We got it. They should pony up. We agree that. We're talking about that at 7:05. when we started this, we're working on that. They're good folks, they're just not tremendously organized. And, we're working on it. So let's get to shift to still New Highland Park. Lauren, would you bring it?
So there's been some talk of changing New Highland Park to North Highland Park, and there's ongoing discussions about that. So, no, we're not taking an official vote or anything yet. We'll probably get to that point, but right now we're just still taking input and considering changing the name to North Highland Park.
So never too late to get your pennies worth in, too late to get a nickel's worth in. Anyway, I think that's it for parks. Let's move on to other planning issues. Mr. Brandenburger, will you start us off, sir, with our sewer line?
Yeah, so this might be new news for some, so I know people on the planning committee had heard about this, but there's a sewer line that runs behind Rosedale Road. It's a private sewer line emanated from Callenwald and Laurel Heights on DeKalb County property. Runs behind and actually ties into a City of Atlanta line at the north end of Rosedale Road. That I was out in my backyard one Monday after it rained on Saturday and noticed that there was water coming down the hillside. I looked, it was not just water, it was sewage, and a pretty decent, well, anything's decent when it's going into your backyard and another neighbor's backyard. So the flow itself was not substantial, but there was enough that it was noticeable. Turns out after many calls to several entities and many trips up there with Jack, we found out that there's one leak and one break in the line. I think the net scary point of this is that the leak went on for, I believe, about 19 days before it was actually corrected, and it was going into, there's a little tributary of Rock Creek back there in the backyard, so it was an active flow into the creek for about 19 days. Challenge was, I notified on multiple occasions Callenwald, which is owned by DeKalb County, City of Atlanta, because it ties into their sewer line, Laurel Heights, because it emanates or commences at their property, DeKalb County, multiple agencies, and this happens about every 5 years, and everyone just tends to point fingers at each other and nothing gets done. So we then escalated it to the EPD at the state level, and basically Alex's office and Commissioner Rader over in DeKalb County, and finally, I think after we called the commissioners, we started to see some progress. And it still took, DeKalb hiring a private contractor to go in and dig within somebody's private residence, so the line actually goes underground on one of my neighbor's lots. There's no easement, so it was unbeknownst to them that they even had the sewer line running. They didn't tie into the sewer line. So the whole thing was just really frankly, a mess on multiple occasions. But I'll leave it at that. I think the good news is we finally, after I think day 19 or day 20, got it resolved. Moving forward, there's discussion about the cab or Callenwald actually pumping and tying in directly into the Briarcliff line, which is probably where their sewage should be going anyway. There's discussion about Laurel Heights doing that. We need to follow through and see if they actually do that, but ideally that would be an ideal solution, because we could sunset this line that's probably 80 years old and is not being maintained or anything like that. So I don't know, Jack, you were up there a lot with me.
I think that's the key thing. It was a very difficult political science question, with both groups having arguments on their side, and neither group covering themselves with public interest distinction, but it has been resolved. The county is moving to get off the line. Laurel Heights is going to have to be pressured to get off the line, and the EPD was late. But in any case, it's not leaking anymore. The only good news is it was really an ooze more than a leak, because there was only 1 or 2 customers on it, but it was a nightmare, and it was really, really frustrating. It was one of the most irritating things I've ever been involved in all the years.
And you said, I think, that it wasn't the first time this has happened, right?
I've been there since '99. I think it's probably the third or fourth time.
Well, it's the third reported time the sanitary line that anybody's mentioned has happened. Normally, they've been clogs and able to be fixed quickly. This is broken in 2 places, right beside a huge tree, on private property, in another jurisdiction. owned by homeowners who didn't know it existed, as David said. It could not have been, it was a perfect political science storm, and hot potato was the name of the day. Just pitch it back and forth, and while they did, it leaked. So the cab eventually got it fixed, and but it could happen tomorrow, because there's still broken, old pieces of line in there. This is really taking a deep breath. David has, at least in his backyard.
Maybe literally.
What have they done to rehabilitate the yards where all this sewage is?
No, it really wasn't anything
Wasn't
to
that
do. It
bad?
wasn't much, but the water, the rain will take care of it. It'll dilute it, but it was crummy.
You can swim in the creek again.
No, I don't think so.
We have a couple of, why don't you tell us about the issue you were going to bring up for the appeal, Debbie? We'll tell you what I think we're doing on that.
Well, I was just asking the question if the board's taking a position on it.
No, well, we did not take, the appeal that's being referred to is the merit argument that has occurred, the merit of the argument by a citizen who's arguing that the decision on its merits was a faulty decision. And we have not taken a position on that, on the merit of that. We may take one depending on an appeal, if there is an appeal, depending on what the BZA claims or says about the question.
Which property are we talking
So
about?
it's a Superior Court.
That's right, that's
The
possible.
mix.
Oh, mix.
And no, this is not the mix. Which one are you talking about?
I was talking about the 841 North
That's what
Lawn.
she's talking
Okay, on the mix.
about. Jack's talking about something else.
I'm talking about Rosedale Road, so,
Oh, okay.
okay, on 841 the mix. This is the appeal of the owner that the building permit should not have been extended repeatedly. We have not taken a position on that because it is, it is the property owner's belief that has been postponed and will not be heard this Thursday.
Again? Oh, no, it's not this Thursday. It's next, it's scheduled for July. But it has to be heard at the MPU meeting in June to be.
We have not, our position has been in the past that we have, this board historically, and this board now could change it. This is a question of whether or not the city of Atlanta acted within its legal discretion to constantly renew the building permit every 6 months, as it is allowed to do, assuming substantive progress has been made on the project. They have renewed the process.
It says diligent, that's
Yes,
the word.
yes, so they have chosen to renew this process, this permit at the mix for every 6 months for about 5 years.
Wasn't that after somebody at the city signed something for you guys saying, no, he's lost it? And then somebody else came in later and said, oops, no, that's not right? I mean,
Yes, there was a narrative in which a secretary announced, the director announced that they had failed to apply, but as it turned out, he then said his secretary had handled the application, and that was his administrative error. In any case, I mean, regardless, I mean, that's an anecdote. The reality is that this board has twice looked at this policy and has consulted the best legal advice I think we have on this topic, who has said, no, we're talking about you, I was not about our other consultant.
Find the best legal advice we have on this issue.
No, but I mean, the law, our best zoning consultant on this said the law, the argument is not completely without merit, but that the law is written so vaguely and poorly that the city has astonishing discretion, and that his recommendation would be that anybody seeking to appeal the decision of the city in either direction would be facing a substantive hurdle, because the city has such wide discretion, so vaguely written, and so poorly written. So we have not supported that. We understand that, our understanding is that it is into July or even August, it's been postponed, but anyway, so that particular piece we have not supported.
It is on the NPU agenda for next Monday.
And Daniel can come and argue that himself in front of the board, he will. I do want to bring up one other thing about the mix. So Daniel has written, this is Daniel Moriarty, who is the lawyer for the owner, Casey Branch, who lives directly behind the property in question. He also happens to be married to her. Has argued, based upon the building plans that have been filed that are on record with the Bureau of Buildings, the Office of Buildings, that the proposed construction, the manner in which the transitional height plane is calculated is erroneous, and that in fact the proposed elevation from which it should be calculated is higher than the one that is being used in the application. This is a technical matter that was difficult for us to estimate, so we asked Mr. Bullock to take a look at that on his own. And Mr. Bullock, can you tell this whole board what you reported to the planning committee?
Yes, in reviewing the plans, I found that the parking structure exceeds the location that it would be allowed to reach by, between 4 and 5 feet in some places, both vertically and horizontally, because there was an additional restriction on parking structures that goes horizontal, as opposed to the 45 degree that most of us would be familiar with. It was in effect on 3 weeks before these plans were submitted, so it would have to be applied to the criteria that would be judged by. So basically, I have done my own little analysis for our group and had provided that to Daniel for his information, and then sort of jointly together we combed through the plans and looked over it from a technical standpoint over all the issues, and he and I were in agreement on what our sort of finding of facts were as far as the design relative to the zoning criteria. He wrote that up, we collaborated on it, and then subsequently Jack asked Aaron to do a back.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. But in order to comply, the design would have to be changed in some way.
So the design is, as we understand the process, correct me if I'm wrong here, Chip, that design could be conceivably changed if the city commanded that it be so, if they agreed with this argument. Ms. Moriarty has submitted this argument to the Office of Buildings and asked for them to rule on it. They have not yet ruled on it, and apparently are not likely to rule on it, is our understanding from Alex's office, unless the plans move forward. So this is kind of a chicken and the egg. Where the plans move forward, they don't want to apparently do the work and the effort into the calculating it. And so I'm not sure if that's correct, but that's our understanding. Meanwhile, just to be sure, we appreciated Chip's efforts, and he is a professional in this field and does this for a living, but we asked Aaron independently, whom we all know, to look at this. And Aaron had a few comments, first of all, about framing the issue, that the transitional height plane, which we are substantively dealing with less here than we ever have to because of our NC zoning, but it is the traditional way for dealing with issues where commercial and residential abut. So it's a frequently addressed issue. And I mean, as he describes it, it's the holy grail of approaching this matter and these matters. It is not a casual or carelessly determined. It has been reviewed many, many times. So he took a look at it. His independent of Chip's completely in Daniel's, without their calculations in front of him. His independent review substantively confirmed their calculation that the reason this has come up as an issue is that the owners would, from the rear property owner's point of view, the buildings being lower would be less intrusive and therefore more acceptable to them. From the owner's point of view, if I understand their perspective correctly, and I don't want to try to misrepresent it, having to dig down to use the lower transitional height plane figure would mean additional expense from simply having to excavate to dig down, and that's just more money. Nonetheless, they have not yet offered to concede on that, but they are pressuring this board and this planning committee and this group for some opinion as to whether or not we can support their plans conceptually. And I think it's a very difficult thing to respond to, given the disagreement over this transitional height plan. Their current plans lower the building in the front by 5 feet, but this separate parking structure is higher than it appears to be mandated by the facts. And I'm phrasing it carefully, because there's maybe some disagreement about how reasonable people could interpret this. So we do not want to just refuse to answer them on the ground and string this out. They are under time pressure. I would like this board to consider empowering us to go and ask them, to tell them we can support their plans conceptually as they are presented, if they can accept the lower transitional height plan calculations, which would lower the building in the back and reduce the impact on their rear neighbors, and make some other considerations about keep the lower height in the front, provide some of the other NC accoutrement about bike racks and other things that they generally will agree. And they have offered to consult with, but carefully not to give the final opinion of whether we ask them about what the exterior of the building would look like. That is not required anywhere under the code. And what we've asked is that they be sensitive to the traditional look and feel of exterior buildings in the longer corridor. This is a big decision, because if they were to accept this offer, we might still be in opposition to Mr. Moriarty, who might still otherwise oppose the building on its own merits. So I want to be clear that we might be in the position of supporting as a board something that had not been fully vetted by, or fully supported by adjacent neighbors who would much prefer that it not be built at all. And so we're kind of in the midst here on this issue. Yes, ma'am.
So this is for a proposed new owner buying this?
Yes, so the proposed new owner has an option to buy the land, as we reported previously, and to construct a building. And this would eliminate the previous owner from the picture, and this would be a new owner who would develop a proposed new structure, which would be one less story than allowed, and somewhat lower in the front. Yes, ma'am.
When these plans originally were drawn, there were parking places in there, 24,
Yes, ma'am.
that were required for other businesses,
Yes, ma'am.
off-site parking. Is that still a requirement for that building?
Yes, ma'am, and we have slightly different numbers. They believe that number is a little bit higher than 24 that they're required to provide for Mr. Landau.
They believe there's more than 24.
That number seems to be, but it's not less, it's certainly, it's not less than that number. It is not less than that number. It would be at least that amount of number that they have to provide for their own uses, plus at least that number. Yes.
Did you get a hold of Mark Campus to
No.
participate in this?
No, not yet. That was on the design end of it more than on this piece, which I think is a board issue. This issue is, should we, I think the developers perceive that our failure to act on this could be construed as an attempt to kill it by dragging it out and refusing to act. In fact, I don't think we're refusing to act. We're trying to really understand what the exact choices are. This is a critical issue, the transitional height plan. Chip has spent a huge amount of time calculating it, and then to be safe, we went and handed it to Aaron. So we think there's a substantive argument here, but we're not willing. That doesn't mean it would necessarily prevail at the city, because funny things happen. So, and the other side, I'm sure, has talented people that might happen to disagree one way or another. So in order to address this issue, which is a real issue, we would like to be able to ask them to make some concessions here along this issue. Go ahead and use the numbers as they are calculated by Aaron, and which are substantively similar to the ones that are calculated by Chip. And that would lower the building in the back and reduce the visual impact on that one, particularly in that one structure that is immediately adjacent to it. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Grant,
Well, as Jack mentioned, but just to be clear, that when the potential new owners came to us, they've already made some concessions. And Jack mentioned them, with the height, with stepping back the building on the front, and changing to have less retail, which decreased some of the parking needs, and they talked about the 24 spaces at that time. So they have been, willing to compromise, and I think now, with what we've learned about the transitional height plane, we, can say we appreciate those concessions, and that there's some more that we'd like them to consider, to be sure that they're abiding by our current code. On top of the other things that they're not required to do, but they are offering to do. And as Jack said, with the not having, definitely not having input on design neighborhood-wide, but allowing Aaron and the planning committee to talk about and see, basically the neighborhood commercial concepts and things that we would like to see them apply beyond what they've already done.
What I wanted to know was, does the change in ownership, as David says, the new owner is attempting to, or not attempting, but he's going to use the original plans with some modification. That is the 5-story building that he started with?
it's a proposed new owner, it's an option to buy that has not been exercised, so there's no,
No, I know.
there's no proposed new owner yet. He proposes a one less story than was originally proposed, only one floor of commercial, no 2 floors as was originally conceived. And the remaining floors will be residential.
How many? Three?
No, 4. So whether or not that is a concession or not is in the eye of the beholder. Daniel would argue that this is what they believe, this is what the market bears, and so in fact, that's why they've reduced it, which is fair enough. Nothing wrong with either characterization, it just kind of depends on how you put it.
Does this potentially offer us the opportunity to, once again, get the city to say it's got new owner, he's got to do his own plans?
Right.
Does that now not give us the NC-17?
I think that's correct.
Or at least a
I think
chance
you're correct,
to
that it does not give us that chance, and here's why. This has been a touchy and interesting negotiating point from the beginning. To what degree can the plans be altered from this? Because the one simple way then is don't alter them at all, just build the whole damn thing. Well, there are some concessions, there's some changes that the owners, potential new owners, are proposing that we very much approve of. So we can't have both sides of that argument, nor can they. Neither group can have both sides of that argument. If you're going to say that it's okay to make the changes that we think we'd like you to make, then or they want to argue the same thing, and we have argued right back to them. The city will only allow us to make certain concessions, has been brought up, and our response was, okay, well, if they'll allow those concessions. So I think the general consensus is that if there's a way to make a deal that we can all live with, that we can probably work something out here. And so the question is, what kind of deal are we making and what are we working out?
The building plans that are with this current building permit, are they for 2 stories of commercial and 3 stories or is that modified? And what are the building plans that are associated with the building
Sure,
permit?
you want to talk about it?
I don't remember the exact stories and all of that kind of stuff. I don't even have the plans here. They're the ones that the permit was had on, and these guys have changed. They've taken the original plans, marked up what they're taking out, so it's clear to see what.
It's only 1 story of commercial,
Yeah.
Right.
residential.
So the reason why I'm asking is that if they're offering to modify, are they offering to modify have they offered to modify several years ago, but this is not a new thing that they're going to be changing, that they're just kind of bringing us up to date on where they are? Or do they actually have to physically change the building plans, which should trigger a new building permit?
think that might be the way that you look at it, and it might be the way that other substantially informed citizens look at it, but the way my impression is that there is a way to work out this arrangement as it has been proposed, and that the question is, what are the pieces that we would ask for? So I would drop the process pieces if I were you, because we've asked those questions, and this seems to be acceptable. And I will not try to dictate the logic under which it is acceptable. It appears to be acceptable.
And acceptable to the city, is that?
Yes, acceptable to the city. If
Not
it weren't
necessarily
acceptable to the city,
to the
we
city.
wouldn't be wasting our
Exactly.
time here. I mean, we would just say, who cares? What you think or we think, who cares? The city has signaled without saying that this would appear to be doable.
Well, the reason they're doing that is because for years and years and years, they have interpreted it that way. So they would simply be in a lawsuit
That is
because,
entirely reasonable. Yes.
because they would be changing their interpretation of it. Although it's definitely, in my opinion, that they would, it could have been declared unconstitutional a long time ago.
Okay, but we're not gonna go there just because would be okay with me if somebody had gone there, but nobody has. So we're just gonna have to go forward with where we are. What's in front of us is this. And so our cute little our challenge here is if these owners will agree to meet the requests from the residents in the back and lower this building. What is clearly here is that I think there's an opportunity to push this forward and possibly settle it. That is a big concession that is a decision for them that may represent actual cash if they have to dig down further. There's nothing, as I understand, that's just cold-blooded decision about whether or not it's worth it. And because it costs money to go dig that out. And that was,
This is like digging down in the back.
yes, digging down in the back to use the transitional height plane that Aaron and Mr. Bullock think is where it needs to be. And so,
Because those two floors that were going to be commercial, part of the first floor was going to be underground, the way I remember the plans.
no, I don't remember that. What I remember is that
Yeah, because you had to go down some steps.
You mean part of the parking associated with that?
no, I think the street level, I think it was at the street level, but regardless of that, they needed more parking under the other. I mean, all of this proceeds from the fact that with less space in the commercial piece of this, they need less parking. Therefore, they can save money that way.
I think it's important when you do talk to these people that it's not just the fact that the people in the back, the neighbors in the back want it to be lower. It's the way the zoning laws
That's
require
right.
it.
That is the basis of our argument.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're not, that was hence the statement about the transitional height plane as a holy grail. This is not, we're not arguing it'd be real nice. We're arguing that that's what the
Your
law,
last statement made
the
it
law
sound like that.
says. And so the question is, do we fight about that or do we not fight about that? We can argue that. There's some other opinions out there and there's some talented people that might not see it that way. And so we can either have a big long fight about this or can we settle it? And if they're gonna really make it, do we meet them in the middle or not? I don't know if they'll meet us in the middle. I don't know if they see that as the middle. We think the argument has merit. And so I'm asking this board if it wants us to go back and say, look, if you'll work on this with us, we think we could support this.
Jack, wait. That means you have ruled out another alternative of doing nothing with the new owner and banking on, or even relying that if they have to change the plans, we can then enforce NC 17.
That's right. I do not believe that will succeed. I agree.
Why are you ruling it out as an alternative? You're not sure this is going to succeed.
Because it's a expensive and difficult proposition that is fact-intensive, that the best zoning lawyers that we have talked to are reluctant to undertake it, that several of the most prominent zoning lawyers in here, as Mr. Moriarty already has found out, are conflicted out of this case. They've been hired either by this developer prior to now or by Mr. Landau prior to now. And that's a wonderful argument to make in the abstract and a very difficult path to pursue, and that it could be an all or nothing. Well, if we're going to be openly antagonistic to it, we can go that route, and we will lose such ability to negotiate other concessions as we think we may be able to negotiate. So that is always the thing. Do you have a fist fight and hope you win, knowing that if you don't, you really lose? Or do you try to negotiate a settlement? And that's the question we're posing here.
Well,
Yes, ma'am. Excuse me one second. Lawrence had her hand up. Go ahead.
I'm curious, when you said potentially consulting with the new owner on the design or outside look of it, is that something that has been proposed to them, or that's just an idea that you would?
No, we have, they have agreed to hear input. They
Okay.
have not, they've very specifically said, we will not have design charrettes, we will not have any of that. They have the last word. But that's not, there's nothing in the code that requires them any of that. It was not a coincidence that Mr. Landau came with a smoked glass steel exterior that did not appear to pick up the best elements of Virginia-Highland architecture. It was a little humor from him, I think.
Don't say that, he'll be sorry.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know, perhaps he didn't think it was funny at all. Jess?
I was just curious if it was grandfathered in somehow with the stormwater, if they were gonna have to upgrade that ordinance as well.
They have underground stormwater that is current with whenever the permit was permitted in 2009, whenever it was. So it's not the new one, and there's nothing to compel them to do that unless it gets into another situation. I might add, just in passing, there's a thing called standard of care, and when there are issues like this, somebody would be allowed to just fine-tune things until everything is satisfied, rather than doing any of the other stuff that we're talking about. It's just too hard to prove.
That was what I was going to add, in kind of in comment to you, Fraser, is that, if your plans are not, they allow for a reasonable amount of change to be made, and so again, the way that Jack was talking about is to get to the point of arguing about that, to the point where we might lose some of these other, concessions that I think are really good, to find ourselves in a place where we're back where we started with the old plans, because we don't come to the table and compromise on a lot of good suggestions and good work that's been done. That's kind of where we've all been in the discussions at the planning committee, is that potentially that even with this transitional height plane issue, the city could say, it's not significant enough, but we'll allow you to make those changes, and they could also then go that way and not make some of these other, what appear to be very good compromises. So that's why we're.
I don't want to belabor or carry it on anymore, but I would like to talk to you, sir, after the meeting, because you can still go back and forth. So I just wanted to get some information from you.
I think it's a great idea if you can settle this, but did I understand you correctly to say that you and the new owners can come up with a compromise that the city then is still okay, even though the plans don't say that?
I mean, certainly don't speak for the city. Certainly.
But I mean, is that the idea, that they can take this up?
I can only repeat what I said earlier. I think there have been signals that if an agreement has been, the substantive issues can be resolved between the builders and the community association, which, don't you worry, we never confuse with community, that this has a chance to move forward.
Settlement's always the better way of going.
So
So we have a motion?
I will entertain a motion.
Okay, so, do you want to do this?
Make your motion, but I do have a comment to make.
Okay. So the motion is to request that the board approve, Jack, do you want to make a motion, because I see your mouth?
Well, I do. I think it's important that the board know what we're doing here, because we're not about, the board takes a chance of being not representing certain segments of the community, and I'm damned if we're gonna have any members of the board not even represent the rest of the board. So we've handled this calmly and placidly to this point, but there's a point where we need to just chop. So I'll make a motion that the board approve our negotiating with the developers to see if they will, that we will entertain, we are willing to bring back a motion of support. We're willing to entertain the notion of supporting the building as designed, broadly designed and proposed, assuming the rear part of the building is built at the, using the elevations for the transitional height plane that Mr. Fortner and Mr. Bullock would substantially match the assertions of Mr. Marari, let's be clear, that those are the elevations that are used, which will lower the building, have the effect of lowering the building in the back. And that, we're not going to sign some deal, this board's got to make the deal, but I mean, that would be, we may need if they are under hurry, they haven't revealed to us their time pressures, except that they exist. And so, I don't mind a little pressure, but that's what it is. And then meanwhile, we'll continue to negotiate for the other pieces that we've represented to you. That there will be other concessions that they have generally broadly agreed to make under NC. To try to match, the sidewalk widths will be there, the bike capacity will be there, the traffic issue, study issues will continue to move forward, and there may be others that we can all try to think of and enumerate, and we will get to comment upon the design. But that is all. It will not, we have no, it's never been on the table.
And to be clear, it is the designs that they brought to us, the conceptual designs reflecting the lowering of the height and the setback.
The lower height in front, and the transitional height plane as determined previously discussed in the rear, and then we would try to negotiate the remainder of it here. There may be a setbacks, Aaron has suggested some slight setbacks of the upper floor to reduce some of the mass feel, and those are things we can just try to ask for. But there's no reason to talk about this if we can't get the issue, if we're going to go clunk over the issue in the rear. Let's not waste our time on that stuff. If they're not willing to lower it in the back and they think they're right, they can push that, and that'll be that. The decision will be taken out of our hands. But we think they're making an effort. We think we could do worse. This opinion, when we discussed this with our Arlington neighbors, nobody loved it. Some people thought, though, that in fact there were worse developers than these to deal with. We can do worse than the building currently being proposed. That didn't mean they weren't supporting it. So we're just trying to give some flexibility here. I think the time has come to let this board be part of it. That's all.
Okay, so the motion says we authorize the planning committee to negotiate with the developer, expecting the planning committee to negotiate for a reduction in the rear height to the transitional plane, among other things, and we anticipate the planning committee bringing back an overall plan for a final vote based on their compromise on which we would all agree.
Right, if there's time pressure, it might have to be a special meeting, it would be publicized. But that's what we're trying to, the key issue here is the transitional height plane in the rear, and it's the same height in the front.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Well, there's a comment. Go
I'll make a
ahead.
comment.
Go ahead.
This is my comment. When the mix was first brought to the community,
Yeah.
there were a lot of people that were upset, a couple hundred that, at least, that were very, very upset. Quite frankly, I fear for the security of this board for you to make this kind of decision without going back to the community and not necessarily doing it in public meetings, but seeking out the folks that spoke the loudest against the mix. Because that property has been dormant for the last several years, there hasn't even been a sign up to indicate that they may
Let me just truncate this a little. There's no way in hell we're going to make a deal without writing an article.
I get that, Jack, but I think you just have to be really cautious in the way that you go to the developers, that you're not representing the community, and you're really not representing the board, but that here's what we think may work, and you're going to have to turn around and sell it back to the community, because you still have 200 people.
I'm truncating because we've said that from day one to them. We've said all of that from day one to them. I promise you we have. We're not gonna make a deal, announce it, and say, if you don't like it, too bad. But I don't know, we have no deal to announce unless we could try to make one. So-
Just be cautious. Just, I mean, you guys have just gone through a firestorm over the master plan because of the appearance, and I don't agree with this, but there was an appearance that you're acting independently and not representing the community. So just don't do it again.
I appreciate the advice. I didn't think that was a firestorm, but I appreciate the advice. Go ahead.
I have a question at that point. Earlier, so she said it would be an NFU meeting, is that this plan or just some other discussion about it?
No, it was another kind of storm. I would use another 4-letter adjective in front of it, but not
I was
fine.
trying to be- I did say I fear for your safety, didn't I?
Yes.
Mr. Moriarty's appeal that was, I think, scheduled for the NPU discussion is purely about the renewal, the 6-month renewal. This appeal is not part of his thing. He's just asked the Bureau of Buildings to rule on it, expecting that they would, I think, very sincerely. And we kept expecting they would, and we've told the developers, well, this is a pending issue, let's get a decision from them, expecting that they would opine. They are not opining, we understand. And either because it's a hot potato, or because they want this worked out and then they can agree. Or I do not know why. I cannot speak for the Bureau of Buildings.
So maybe if the motion was amended, just taking into account what you pointed out, maybe if the motion was amended to say something similar to authorizing the planning committee to kind of open a discovery conversation with the developer.
It's gone past that
It's
already.
too, yeah,
It's
it's
a
too,
negotiation.
it's too late.
We're trying to
negotiate.
I don't want to go negotiate something that we can't support, but that doesn't mean we're announcing it as a done deal any more than we would anything else. But I mean, we didn't go through a process on the master plan to come up with something that we didn't agree with, but it wasn't this fun. So I mean, if we think this is the best deal, after we're through with it, we can decide that we think it's the best deal and argue that. And if folks can convince us otherwise, we'll be convinced. But we already have some feedback from the Arlington community.
Right, yeah.
And that was very important. We went to them immediately when we invited all those neighbors. Those are by far the most impacted neighbors. So we did not run off in the corner and decide this ourselves. We went to them instantly. So, you know, we're conscious of that. And it's going to be hard, Debbie, for anybody, if they're okay, and I'm not saying they will, if there's a they, or that it will be okay, because there are many theys there. But
I totally get that. I think it's a communication issue.
Yeah.
I think you've got to be really cautious.
Thanks.
And thank God we've got someone as good as John that communicates very well and straightforward. I think you got to treat this like a PR issue.
Over-communicate.
Over-communicate.
Jack, you met the guys and negotiated with them yourself, right?
we've met them, yes.
No, because will you assure me that we're not dealing with a certified nut? Like, I mean, that's part of the problem is, we know what it's like before, and you could never take his word for anything.
No.
These are right.
Let's stop right there. Not a bit. These are reputable, solid folks.
We know we dealt with it before.
No, we're not dealing with that yet.
But if we, you're certain if we come to an agreement, that they'll stick by it when they go to their plans?
As much as.
Well, that's what, well, as much as we can, yeah, right.
As much as the city will allow.
Come on, come on.
And we have no authority.
Well, you know.
How can we guarantee something we have no authority for? All we
No.
can do is
It's
No,
gonna
no,
be fine.
I'm just getting the fact that there is a difference now. We're dealing with people.
Come on, those are
that
givens.
rational,
Those are
trustworthy,
givens. Those are
As opposed to
givens.
the guy we have to.
But just to elaborate, to be, throughout the meetings, until we had conversations about what the conversations have been with the city, what these people are considering, what, compromises they think or they are willing to make or they can make feasibly, budgetarily, all of those kind of things, we needed to talk through that a little bit because as there's nothing to discuss or approve until you really know how much compromise is available to us.
So
And
isn't
we're
the
pushing for-
motion to allow the planning committee to request modifications to the plan to be presented to the community and to the board? That's all it is, right?
That's what it should be.
Then why would the developer talk to the planning committee? I mean, if the planning committee's not got the board behind it, why would the developer bother with the planning committee? I mean, we have these options. We can kill the, potentially clear the deal and be back where we were before with the original plan. We can potentially work with the developer and have a good neighbor and modify the plan somewhat. That's it. Or we can convince the new developer that we're not worth talking to. We want to avoid convincing the new developer that we're not worth talking to, and we want to avoid killing the deal and getting back to the original deal. So the only third alternative is for the planning committee to have enough authority that the developer perceives the planning committee to be worth talking to because the planning committee has the backing of the board. I mean, that's it. The cliffs on either side of that choice are pretty unpleasant.
And I definitely agree and appreciate Debbie's input, and the fact getting a message out, I think is definitely going to be key, because you can, I've learned through the master plan process that you can tweak details and so that it's technically maybe 10% accurate, but then just people get in a tizzy about things. And so it would be great as part of the negotiation or as part of the ask to the developers to maybe have that ask be public, to say, hey, you guys might remember the mix. Here's what is currently proposed and possible. This is what we'd like them to do. Just outline it very clearly. And this is what the board or the planning committee is trying to achieve and fulfill their role as representatives.
So do we have a motion or what?
I think, I mean, to me, it sounds like the motion's been pretty much the same, but the point of the motion is that the planning committee will speak with these potential developers and make the request for them to go ahead and accommodate and comply with what we believe to be the transitional height plan that they should, and keep in play the compromises they've already been willing to make that they are not required to make. And then bring that back to the board, the results of that conversation back to the board. We're hoping that they will agree to make changes in the back and keep the changes that they've offered to make otherwise.
I think the interesting piece of this is I'm going to frame it another piece this way. Daniel has got a tremendous, he's very smart, very sincere, very dedicated. That's two arguments that he is presenting. The one is one that we have weighed and rejected some years ago, that the 6-month piece is challengeable, successfully challengeable, but he can go forward that argument. That argument's not denied to him. That argument's as alive as it ever is, no matter what position we take on. The other is that they're not being treated properly on the transitional height plan and unduly impacted. We're supporting that and agreeing with that and asking that that be implemented. So I'm trying to understand what piece of this that we can do. We could try to, I don't want to, as use Peggy's terms, mess this deal up by not responding at all and dragging it out, leaving the home, and we need to act in good faith. And that doesn't mean we owe the developer, that's not what I mean, that we owe the developer anything in that. We need to respond in good order. That's what acting in good faith is. Evaluate, respond, take a position. So I mean, I think we're supporting the most acute position that the landowners have presented. We've analyzed the living hell out of it. We support it. We think it's right, and we're standing on it. And we could support that all the way in a big battle in court if that's ever where it got. We could do our best. The other one we don't think will work, but if the homeowner wants to carry it forward, he can. If he succeeds, all the better. All of it's off the table. It's all done. It's all moved. So I don't see how we're going to get very far in front of the community here. The people that have analyzed this the most acutely, Daniel has made 2 requests. One we've already looked at and don't agree with. The other we're supporting 100%. And they're asking, we're trying to bring all this in. So I don't think, your advice is, your point's well taken. Nobody knows the lesson better than Jess, who strew logical petals in front of silliness for months and eventually deflected a good deal of it. But so That's the way I framed it, that's the way I see it in my own mind, I think that's the way we've been talking about it, so. I want the board to know where it's at though, because there is a possibility to have some fun here.